Okay, good afternoon, committee members and participants. We are now live.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a joint committee on the Committee of Public Safety and Education to review resolutions 230-089, 230-090, and 230-091. And before we get started, we have an important announcement from Joshua Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of City Council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and also can be found on phlcouncil.com. Everyone who has been invited to this meeting to testify should be aware that the public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is being recorded, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in this meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to Councilmember Jones recognizing members for questions or comments they have for the witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, that chat feature must be used for this purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Can you please give an opportunity to read the roll so we can establish a quorum? And will members say a few words so that your image can be captured on video? Thank you.
First, the Committee on Public Safety, Councilmember Thomas.
Good afternoon, colleague. Good afternoon to the audience. I'm present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Gaudier.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Harity.
I am here, my friend. I am here.
Councilmember Lozada. Vice Chairman Johnson. Chairman Jones.
I am present and a quorum has been established.
We need to also have the Committee on Education.
Please read the roll.
Councilmember Squilla. Councilmember Gaudier.
Present.
Councilmember Phillips.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning.
Councilmember Lozada. Vice Chairman Brooks. And Chairman Thomas.
Again, good afternoon. I'm present.
A quorum has been established and we are now calling this hearing to order. Mr. Cohen, will you please read the title of the bill, resolutions?
Yes. 230089, a resolution authorizing the joint City Council Committees on Public Safety and Education to hold public hearings to examine the status of capital programs for infrastructure repair and toxic hazard remediation in Philadelphia's public schools. I would also like to note for the record at this time that resolution number 230090 and 230091 are both being held and will not be addressed by the members today.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Before we get started with the first panel to testify, I'd like to give an opportunity for my co-chair of education, Isaiah Thomas, to say some words.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your leadership, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you to everybody as far as my colleagues, as well as representation from the school district for being here today. This is an important conversation. We've talked about it a number of times as it relates to not just where we are currently, but the direction of the city of Philadelphia. So I'm happy to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and I'm hoping we can take some positive steps as it relates to providing every child in the city of Philadelphia quality education. So thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to set this off, we have been waiting with great anticipation to get started with how we begin to change the direction of public education for our students. I had the opportunity of sitting right next to Superintendent Dr. Watlington when the governor gave his remarks about the budget. And every time when we heard about resources coming for public education, we couldn't contain ourselves and began to support the governor's vision. We think it's in the right direction. Many people think it could be a little more and that it's a floor and not a ceiling. And we hope that that is true. So we have separated some resolutions coming up into the budget to deal with public education. And the first one, which we're going to hear and have testimony on today, deals with the capital side and the money dedicated to change our schools' physical plant, the environment that they find themselves in, and the challenges not only for students, but teachers and staffers as well. And so to that end, we're looking and excited about your vision on it and to share our vision with you. Are there any other members of the committee who would like to say a few words? Seeing none, Mr. Cohen, will you read the title of the resolution one more time and to invite the first panel to testify? Mr. Cohen. Are you there, Mr. Cohen?
I am sorry, I was on mute. The resolution is to examine the status of capital programs for infrastructure repair and toxic hazard remediation in Philadelphia's public schools. The first witness panel is Dr. Tony Watlington, Superintendent of Schools, and Mr. Oz Hill, Acting Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you both. And we look forward to your testimony. I don't know if this is your first. No, this is not your first time to testify, Doctor. So state your name for the record and please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Tony Watlington, Superintendent School District of Philadelphia. Thank you, Chair Jones, and I'll say thank you to Chair Thomas for the opportunity to be here. You want me to continue with my testimony, sir?
Would you please?
Absolutely. I'm joined by Interim Chief Operations Officer Oz Hill. Colonel Hill stepped into this role when Governor Shapiro appointed former Chief Operations Officer Reggie McNeil as one of his cabinet secretaries. He's doing a fine job so far. He's committed to transparency and attention to detail. He's a military man, and he brings that skill set to this role he's in presently. Also with us this afternoon, Mr. Chair, is our Chief of Staff, Sarah Galbally, and our Chief of Communications and Customer Service, Alexandra Coppage. And we have our Director of Government Relations who's driving the PowerPoint. So we'll ask Ms. Laurel if she'll pull that deck up and we'll jump right in. As she pulls the presentation, Mr. Chairman, I also want to note for the record that we have submitted a formal document that outlines where we are with the facilities maintenance and our process that we have outlined to move this work forward relative to capital improvements and the long road that we hope won't be too long to make significant infrastructure improvements, because we understand clearly that our students can't continue to wait. And we've heard that loud and clear. So I'm pleased to provide this facilities planning overview to Council, to the Education Committee on Public Safety. Next slide, please. I want to begin by just kind of giving you an overview of what we will share with you, Chair Thomas and members of Council. We're going to start with giving you the historical context of this issue, and we've been very deliberate to try to be very clear, cogent, and concise, and provide the appropriate attention to detail so that you have a clear understanding of where we've been, where we are currently, and where we need to go, and equally important, how we propose to get there, at least the initial steps and how we propose to get there. So after the historical context, we'll provide a state of our current infrastructure. I'm going to share with you an overview of the Parsons report, where an external consultant was hired by the school district in 2017. We're going to give you the summary findings from that report and how it influences where we are right now. We'll detail the cost to improve district facilities. We'll speak to the deferred maintenance cost and district facility investments that have been made to date. Then we'll provide an overview of what the future facilities needs are. We'll also share what's happening here in the school district right now. We'll continue over the next 5 years. We'll update council on our asbestos management, as well as assessments and record keeping and other environmental issues that are relevant that council should be updated on. And then we're going to conclude with some next steps before we take questions or comments. We'll conclude with some next steps about what will happen over the next 30 days, specifically to moving us down the road to making facility improvements in the school district of Philadelphia. Next slide. I want to begin by providing background and historical context to the problem. In order to address our significant infrastructure and facilities problems, we want to make sure that we are very clear about how we see them. As you know, members of council, or may not know, the school district is composed of more than 300 buildings. The average age of our buildings are 73 years old. Some are as old as 120 years old, and more than 200 were built prior to 1978. Most of the buildings were constructed using lead-based paint, and many contain asbestos. And you may well recall that asbestos was commonly included as building material before we fully understood the widespread implications of asbestos years ago. Next slide. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a bit about the state of our infrastructure. So I'll go specifically to the 2017 Parsons Facility Conditions Assessment Report. An external consultant did an assessment of 308 buildings total in the school district. And we've summarized the findings from that study here. The consultant gave every building a facility condition index score. The number ended up being 32.14%. Colonel Hill will talk a little bit later about what that specifically means. And for now, we'll just note that these are facilities that the consultant recommended should be actively replacing systems within those buildings. The deferred building maintenance cost was tagged at $4.5 billion. The study also, one of the conclusions of the study is that we had and continue to have 85 buildings in the district that require not minimal, not modest, but major renovation, given their age and condition. And the report noted that 21 of the facilities should be recommended or should be considered, not recommended, should be considered for closing or replacement. Next slide. So how much does it actually cost in the school district based on the study that was done in 2017 with subsequent updates that were provided in some areas in order to ensure that we have safe, healthy, and welcoming learning environments across the district? The reason I'm using the term safe, healthy, and welcoming environments is because our Board of Education has a guardrail. You're familiar with the board's goals and guardrails. There's a guardrail related to this area. So the cost in 2017 to move our facilities forward such that they are safe, healthy, and welcoming learning environments across the district was tagged at $7.789 billion. I do want to note that this was a 2017 number. Fast forward 6 years, and we know that number is likely higher now, given inflation and other cost increases. But I do want to give you that hard number that was specifically referenced in the report. Next slide. Now, let's look at how that $7.789 billion broke down. The Parsons group recommended these costs by building systems. So we take that $7.789 billion, $4.5 billion is related to deferred maintenance costs. It's no different than your house and my house and your car and my car. If you don't keep the maintenance up, you got to do more work to it down the road. $4.5 billion. There's $2.4 billion related to failing systems or systems that are beyond the service life in the building. And then finally, $430 million to address environmental hazards, risks, and other safety deficiencies. This document we've submitted, so you should have copies of this for the record. I also want to note that we have a formal narrative report that accompanies this. This PowerPoint presentation just gives you the high-level overview, but I would encourage every member of council to read the detailed facilities plan document that we've submitted for the record. Next slide, please. I want to walk you through what has happened in the School District of Philadelphia over the past 10 years relative to facility improvements. Past 10 years. Let's take just a moment to walk through that. Over the past 10 years, and I appreciate you giving me time to really dig in and study this data since my arrival here as your new superintendent. The district invested $1.72 billion in the following. 4 new schools facilities were built. 10 new school additions were completed. There were 46 new classroom modernization projects that were completed. I can tell you that I've been all over the district. I've been in about 75 or so visits, and I've seen some of these modernized classrooms. And it's been quite interesting that in some of the modernized classrooms, there are state-of-the-art classrooms that exist in non-state-of-the-art buildings. So if we can get to the point where we can get the whole school to like a state-of-the-art facility and the function is as such, that would certainly be the gold standard. The district completed lead paint assessments in 194 facilities and certified 169 lead safe schools. Consistent with one of the Board of Education's guardrails, the district added 1,700 state-of-the-art hydration stations in every school. I think we're shy of completing that process by 300 or so hydration stations, but they are available and some are available in every school. The district installed humidity sensors to monitor and prevent mold accumulation in 31 schools that were targeted for that service. And there's been other deferred maintenance, system upgrades, and energy efficiency or other structural improvements and site improvement initiatives. And we're happy to detail those by school for council. Next slide. I want to take just a moment to speak to future facility needs in the school district. The next slide. Our current capital improvement plan in the district over the next 5 years allocates $2.489 billion for the period January 23 through June of 28 as follows. $602 million is allocated for new construction. As you know, Cassidy, Amy 5, we've got 3 schools in the planning phase. $440 million is allocated for major renovations across the district. Small piece compared to the overall number I shared you earlier, but at least the district will be making some progress toward that number. $358 million earmarked for HVAC improvements, $265 million for exterior renovations, $246 million for energy performance improvements, $211 million for electrical work, $54 million for new additions, $114 million slated for site improvements, $68 million for controls, and $41 million plus allocated for minor renovations. That takes us to the next slide. What are the outstanding annual costs to operate and maintain the facilities? I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask Colonel Hill if he will walk you through this piece and the other pieces of information we want to share at a high level. And then I'll come back at the very end and speak to what does this really mean and where do we go from here? And we'll engage in that right after he finishes his part of the presentation. Colonel Hill.
Thank you, Doctor. State your name for the record, Colonel, please, and
Yes,
begin
sir.
your testimony.
Yes, sir. Oz Hill, Chief Operating Officer, School District of Philadelphia. The slide that you see in front of you now highlights the annual cost on an ongoing basis to maintain our facilities. From the facilities department, it's $17.3 million just to maintain on an annual basis. The environmental department requires $7.4 million and the maintenance department requires $7.2 million. And that's a figure, or those figures are ongoing every single fiscal year. Slide, please. Slide. It's good to be with you today. As you've heard from the superintendent, within the confines of our funding, we've made regular investments to improve our facilities, but the need remains significant, especially as it relates to environmental conditions. We rely almost entirely on the city and state for funding. And to that end, we're most grateful for the support from the mayor, the city's education committee, each of the city council members, Governor Shapiro and his administration, external stakeholders, and the philanthropy of the private sector. Slide, please. I'd like to begin by looking deeper at our asbestos management. This is critically important, what I'm about to share right now. There's no simple fix to get rid of all asbestos. In fact, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, says it's often better to manage it in place and maintain it in good condition instead of removing it. There are 295 buildings in the district's asbestos management program that require 3-year inspections and 6-month surveillance under the Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act, or AHERA. The federal law that governs all U.S. schools and how they manage asbestos. In the past, due to understaffing and resource constraints, the district has struggled to keep pace with the inspections and the massive volume of issues that we confront. To that end, in the past, due to these records being challenging but most critically important, because they form the basis of our subsequent inspections. Slide, please. The district is contracting with the LUCA Advisory Services to provide oversight and spearhead process improvements within the AHERA program and across other environmental programs. That includes underground and above ground tanks, chemical management, and lead programs. This contract is $9 million for 3 years. They've helped the district bring on and manage Tetra Tech as consultants to manage our AHERA inspections related to record keeping and data. This is a $24 million contract over 3 years with Tetra Tech, and it will likely be amended due to additional sampling and data support as it continues. This is also the first inspection cycle using a technology platform called DoneSafe, which is a 5-year, $175,000 contract. This platform has assisted with the beginning process of modernizing the school district's data, but it's requiring significant internal support and customization. Slide. Understanding the inspection process, would like to focus on the fact that 3-year inspections take at a minimum several days at each building. One large school can have more than 3,000 materials that require assessment and documentation. Access to these areas is often difficult to reach, and such as in boiler rooms or above ceiling tiles. Tetra Tech inspectors check each of these asbestos-containing materials for changes in condition or damage. Each is documented. Any areas of concern are assessed, and a recommended scope is created for each damaged area. Not all areas require immediate repairs, depending on the location and the type of damage. The abatement work is sometimes addressed by the district's in-house licensed asbestos response team, affectionately known as the A-team. Other times, it is done by an outside licensed contractor. Additionally, the city is notified of any necessary asbestos abatement work, and the city is able to inspect the abatement process. Before any 3-year reinspection report is generated by Tetra Tech, it must undergo a management planner review. This process alone can take over a month due to limitations in staffing and software. A 3-year inspection report includes information regarding the asbestos materials in each room of a building, their condition, as well as information regarding materials that were recently sampled. The district is working on hiring additional management planners and other staff positions to assist with the management of the large data sets and generated in the HERA program. Slide, please. Like people, buildings change with age and require repair and upkeep. Our buildings face deterioration from age, construction, weather events, and other factors. This is why we must examine the condition of asbestos regularly so we can detect any changes or damage that needs to be addressed. With Tetra Tech, our inspections are happening on a more regular cadence. It was during these 3-year inspections that damaged asbestos was observed and determined to require immediate attention in Building 21 and Simon Gratz's Mastery Charter. Our inspection system is improving. In fact, when the district was able to identify that its previous record keeping and processes left gaps, that is a sign of the fact that the process is improved, attributable to the addition of Tetra Tech and DeLuca Advisory Services. To date, we have conducted 230 3-year inspections and 6 in progress and 59 remaining at some of our oldest and largest facilities. In the coming weeks and months, we expect more damaged asbestos to be identified. This is not an indication of a program failure. That means the system is working to protect the health and safety through the identification and management of environmental concerns. We conduct repeat inspections and surveillance because conditions continue to change. This allows us to identify and manage the damage. When the current 3-year cycle is completed, we'll begin again. We also are proposing to hire an executive director and other key staff for the Office of Environmental Management Services to augment and to support the new processes. Slide. We're also making progress in addressing our lead in our buildings. Lead exposure can come through paint or water, and we're addressing both. We have completed lead paint assessments in 194 facilities and certified 169 lead-safe schools, with a particular focus on the facilities that serve our youngest students. who are at the greatest risk of lead poisoning caused by ingesting paint chips or breathing lead dust. We have also installed, as the superintendent shared with you, more than 1,700 hydration stations in schools across the city to provide chilled, filtered drinking water. Each installation in and of itself is a significant project, as the stations require electric, plumbing, and sometimes environmental work as the units are attached to walls and floors. While we have been awarded a significant grant from the EPA for this work, we still need to address the asbestos and lead paint around these stations. That is a challenge of funding and sourcing union and supplemental labor for plumbing and other trades work. We have partnered with TerraPhase, which has expertise addressing lead in water at schools for the hydration station work under the grant. I'll turn it back over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Colonel.
Hey, Dr. Washington, could I implore you to take a pause and see if any of our members have questions at this junction, because this is a lot to unpack, a lot to digest, and you know, our retention at this point might need to kind of get some questions out. And I want to note for the record, Member Phillips and Member Squilla are in attendance.
And also Councilman Johnson, Mr. Chair.
Member Johnson, glad to have you on board. Are there any
Woman
questions?
Lozada, Chairman.
Member Lozada, thank you for being a part of. Are there any questions from members? Because this is a lot to digest. And I wanted to give us a pause. There was a lot of good information given, but we might want to kind of unpack some of it now. What is the pleasure of the group?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Member Johnson.
Well, first of all, I want to thank, is Mr. Oz, is that correct?
Yes, sir, at your service.
For your presentation, as well as Dr. Tony Wallington, as well, for being here today. And obviously, this is a critical issue that we're addressing here in the city of Philadelphia. Two things that stuck out. One, you said that the discovery of the asbestos and the lead in the various buildings showed that your process is actually working. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you just give me an idea of, because obviously this is a matter for me, and I think for all of my colleagues I'm speaking for as well, it's a matter of urgency, right, around this particular process of getting these children in schools that are asbestos and lead free and try to remediate this process as soon as possible. So I want to go from the 30,000 foot view. Give me the ballpark number, budget-wise, manpower-wise, that it would take for us to address this issue on a school-by-school basis, right? Just to give us and the public an idea of what we're dealing with. And then also, Dr. Wallington, we know that we do have a budget process that's coming up soon. And, you know, just for the record, where you already have a preliminary plan for the public as to what's going to be the school district's plan in terms of addressing this issue across the board. And then also, what are the obstacles that impedes us from doing this in a very expedient manner?
Sir, thank you very much for your question. I would rely on the quantitative data that has been provided to the district by Parsons in the 2017 report, highlighting that this report was done in 2017 and does not reflect the inflation that has transpired since that time. In the 2017 report by Parsons, it identifies that another $430 million is required to address health hazards, risks, and life safety deficiencies in our schools. Every year, the delta of that funding needs to grow by $200 million based on inflation. And again, challenges exist with the certified labor force as well as our internal staffing to actually be able to perform this work. And so one of the priorities, and I don't want to get out in front of my boss or else I'll be looking for a job. One of the priorities that the boss has established for us is, with the new budget, is to look at funding to support contract services to offset our staffing shortfalls.
And Dr. Wellington?
Yes, council member, relative to your question about the plan going forward, I will, am in the process of making budget priorities, budget recommendations to the Board of Education, with safety being number one in the budget proposals that I will bring forth in this budget cycle. And I look at safety in three big buckets. One, because safety is our number one priority in the school district. Because we've got to be safe in order to make sure that kids can learn to accomplish the goals and guardrails. So the first big bucket of safety that there'll be priorities in the budget relate to student physical safety. Safe paths, safety zones, we're going to, et cetera, and some things we want to do in schools this year. The second big bucket of safety relates to social and emotional, psychological safety. Won't spend a lot of time on that today because that's not the purpose of this hearing. The third big bucket, though, is environmental safety, and that is the purpose of this hearing. So, Councilmember Johnson, I can tell you that we will be moving pending funding availability. If we don't get more funding, we're going to reallocate funding in the district, but we will bring in an additional executive director to have better oversight of the work we're doing. We are going to hold ourselves completely accountable to doing good work, detailed work, and to the extent that we have the resources to do it. And we're also going to be bringing some additional contracted services so that we can be expeditious in detecting problems, fixing them, mitigating them, and moving forward. Now, we won't be able to fix everything, we know that. Over the longer term, though, we do need to have a really detailed 10, 20-year plan about how we get after doing two things. First, improving the facilities across the board. So no matter where you live in Philadelphia, what zip code you live in, you have the opportunity to go to a safe, healthy 21st century school. And two, we're going to have to make some hard decisions over time about how we utilize the space in our buildings. So the other thing that I will be bringing forward, and it's outlined in your in the written document that you have, and I'll speak to it in just a few minutes. It's about a project team that we are pulling together as we speak that will involve not just School District of Philadelphia staff, but some external people in our community that will be at the table with us. And we're pulling a group together within the next 3 to 4 weeks. We will have that team complete, and I'll look forward to sharing more about that once we get a little bit further into the presentation. I'll come right back to that.
Okay, thank you. One last part. I'm going to wrap up on this, Mr. Chair, if this is okay.
That's fine.
Will part of your strategy have a moonshot project, meaning have we considered actually demolishing certain buildings, right, and rebuilding from the ground up high quality schools for our youth? Because obviously, you know, you're just here, so a lot of this isn't on your shoulders. It is on your shoulders because you signed up for the job. So
Absolutely.
Welcome to Philadelphia. That's just how this process works. But however, if we be upfront about this process, you know, a lot of us on this call have been leaders 10, 15, 20 years in some aspects doing this work. And so this didn't just happen on your watch. This is something that's been going on for a period of time. And obviously the report is from 2017. Then there you go, right? But as we move forward, from a partnership standpoint, right, that is a concern that I've heard from stakeholders or interest from stakeholders on how do we tear down buildings, build them up brand new for the long haul so we're not here at the same place 10, 20 years with even older buildings. And obviously we can't tear down all the buildings here in the city of Philadelphia, but nevertheless, Is that a part of your strategy? I have had conversations with the appropriations chairman, Jordan Harris, around this very same issue with the Fund Our Facilities project. And I was told that he's been in contact with you and your team regarding how do y'all partner with the state to bring down, what is it, Councilman Jones, what, $12 billion they have in the surplus?
Like 13 billion.
13 billion in the surplus to actually be supportive of these efforts. And so that's my last comment. Want to get some feedback from you on moonshot projects that include tearing down buildings and rebuilding them, and your strategy on bringing down those state or even federal dollars as well.
Thank you, Member Johnson. Doctor?
Yes, I'll say two things. First, I'll just call our attention to do this across the city. What you just referenced, Councilmember Johnson, cost us to the tune of $7.7 billion in 2017 dollars. So that number is likely higher. Second, to answer your question very directly, yes, it will be on the table, and it is something we'll be talking about. Are there the buildings that should be demolished and simply replaced? That is absolutely something that will be on the table. Here's the key. Tony Watlington and 5 people won't just sit down in a conference room with the door closed at this 440 and make those decisions. We're going to outline a process going forward by which we will engage our elected officials, community, and other stakeholders, and we'll make sure we'll have representatives at the table as we sit down and make those hard decisions or propose those very hard decisions. And I want to be really clear, there will be some hard decisions that have to be made here in the school district, but we won't be sitting here 6, 7, 10 years from now having the same conversation. I can assure you of that.
Thank you very much.
One thing before I recognize Member Gutierrez, when you talk about 21 schools that you're recommending to close, those are hard, tough decisions. And I don't want to know about them now, but probably during the budget, we might request a map of where those buildings are located, because that is, I remember when we closed similarly like 20 buildings before, the city was asunder with, questions about where, why, how come. And so that is a difficult conversation we have to be prepared to ask. Member Gutierrez.
Mr. Chairman, may I just please, just for the record,
Sure, Doctor.
The 21 schools was a Parsons recommendation, and 2, I'm not saying that that's a superintendent recommendation. That was a finding from the Parsons report. Secondly, we're talking about replacement schools, not closure. And I want to be really clear that we'll continue to work under the leadership of the Board of Education. So I don't want to get ahead of that process. I just want to be as transparent as possible about where we are, what it costs, and those kinds of things.
Thank you for that distinction. Member Gutierrez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Dr. Watlington. Thank you so much for being here today and for taking the time to really dig into this assessment. If I understood the information that you all presented correctly, the price tag, the total price tag for improvements to our facilities is around $8 billion. And we have a plan over the next 5 years to get us through $2 billion of those improvements. And so that puts us 11 years out from when the facilities plan, when this assessment was done, and a quarter of the way through, if I'm understanding it correctly, the improvements that need to happen. And I know that this is a longstanding problem and it's not just your problem, but my questions about that are, what does it mean for us, 5 years from now to only be a quarter of the way through what we need to do? And do you have thoughts on what we need to be doing as a city to reach that larger figure and to get more of the work done quicker? What does, 5 years out, us having 25% of the work done, what does that mean in terms of what gets done and what still needs to be done? And how should we be approaching this as a city and as a state?
Well, I think one way to look at that, if I'm going to go out and buy a car, my budget will in part determine what kind of car I can buy.
Yes.
Money, I'll buy the Cadillac. If I don't have enough money to get the Cadillac, I'll get a Lincoln. If I can't get that, I may just get a good Chevy or that. That just pops in my mind initially. I think that when we pull a team together over the next 30 days, that will be one of the key questions that's right there in front of us. I promise you, I can't fully answer that question other than to say that we're going to make the case to ask for the Cadillac, to the most resources in a historically underfunded district, with the understanding that we may not get all of it, but we are not going to be gung shy about asking for what we need. Again, the number is $7.789 billion in 2017 numbers, which would be higher.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to guess what that number would be adjusted for inflation, but we do know it would be north of $7.89 billion. And we're going to make the case to our legislators, both at the state and the city level, that we intend to be really good stewards. We want to keep telling the story about what is happening in the district. I think that when folks see that there is some work occurring in the district and people are not just sitting on their hands, it might make people a little bit more comfortable with perhaps thinking about more resources relative to the need. That's my long way of answering your question, and I hope I've done a decent job at it.
No, you have. And I wanted to put that on the table because it was very striking to me, that comparison between what we're planning for in the next 5 years and what we really need, right? And beyond the fact that our children deserve the Cadillac, the reason why people just don't keep buying, broke down Chevys is because you got to buy a lot of them, right? You have to keep replacing them, and that's not a wise investment. And so please let council know how we can be a part of a more ambitious ask so that we get what we truly need instead of just a pittance that's not really going to move the needle in terms of what the facilities in our city really need. And then my second question to you is, how does this plan or this assessment rather consider the district's facilities that are more non-traditional learning facilities, like your pools, right? Like the SARE pool. How does this assessment include those facilities, some of which are closed off to young people during a time when young people sorely need safe places to be? And at what priority do those facilities fall within the scope of your planning?
I can tell you that we're in a discussion with the city relative to a memorandum of understanding to bring the SARE pool back online. That's an action item that will be taken to our Board of Education in May. In terms of the bigger footprint of pools in the city, Colonel Hill, can you say a word about whether any of that's reflected in that number, $7.789 billion?
Yes, sir. The pools were not included in the Parsons assessment that was completed in 2017. However, we have last August of 22, we conducted an assessment of all of the pools. Okay. Unfortunately, at that time, we looked at what it would take to repair the pools and maintain them. We did not look at the environmental cost associated with it. Thanks to DeLuca, the DeLuca Advisory, what they have done is included the pools in their assessment strategy for environmental conditions. So that was a long-winded way of saying the 2017 did not provide the pools in its quantified data. Going forward, we have identified that there is an environmental component to the restoration and repair of our pools, and we are looking at them in our environmental data as we're going forward.
Okay, and I thank you, Dr. Watlinson, and your team for your partnership around SARE, and this council, especially Majority Leader Jones, for your support as well. And I'm hopeful that, as we're thinking big about what our kids need, that we do not take a narrow view of where learning happens, and and that we also include the comprehensive ways that kids need to be healthy and safe, and that those pools make their way into what it is that we're fighting for. Thank you so much.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may just say very quickly, you'll recall that in our Board of Education's goals and guardrails, guardrail 2 calls for well-rounded education with co-curricular opportunities. And so although pools are not reflected in that $7.789 billion, that number from 2017, please know that we hear loud and clear the interest among some in the city. We know that according to the Center for Disease Control, CDC in Atlanta, African Americans die 6 times greater death rates due to drownings. I don't talk about it a lot. My own brother was one of those people. So I think that's really an important priority. And the fact that it's not reflected in the $7.789 billion does not mean that we're not trying to move heaven and earth to find ways to be supportive to the extent we can.
Thank you, Dr. Watlington, and thank you for sharing such a personal testimony of why this is important to you. I really appreciate it.
Member Goodyear, I want to applaud you on your advocacy for Sayre Pool, and I learned so much in it as to the benefits other than just recreational. We have a school in my district, Rhodes, which is one of the deep diving pools that for like a couple $100,000 needs to be brought back online. The benefit, the non-traditional career path with that is that there's an association that are teaching young people how to become divers. A whole industry non-traditionally that we just don't always find ourselves associated with. So I want to thank you for fighting for one pool, which is replicating in other areas of the city. So thank you for that.
And I do, Mr. Chairman, if I could just also say, it's really important that council and the public know that there are a lot of things that are happening to try to provide those well-rounded co-curricular opportunities. For example, we're pursuing an MOU with the city also to move the Shepherd Recreation Center temporarily to Daroff, which I believe is in your district.
Yes, it is.
As a space for our young people. And so we want to do a better job of telling our story so that people won't think that everybody in the district is just, we're asleep at the wheel. We are working hard, but we also want to make the case. And when we're wrong and we miss something, we're going to be transparent and say that. But we also want to make the case that we're trying our best to be good stewards of the resources as well.
Thank you for that. Couple quick questions, if I could. So if we were to separate the routine maintenance out, and we are pending, waiting for your concurrence in probably, additions, subtractions on the 21 schools that are recommended by the report to be considered to be closed. We're talking about a $7 billion price tag. Couple of questions with that. When you do routine testing, that happens during the course of the year, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Do you have seasonal times where you try to do remediation of what you find? And would it be better during the summer when the schools are closed, cost effectively, and obviously not interrupting classroom activities? Is that something you plan for?
Absolutely, sir. Our remediation efforts are ongoing throughout the year. And we have our A team, as I mentioned previously, that primarily does its work along with our contractors during the hours that students are not in school. So generally speaking, or routinely, our A team and contractors are working until 11 o'clock or midnight while students are not in school. Additionally, during each of our seasonal breaks, spring as well as the holiday break, we see that as an intensive work period for our environmental team as well as our capital programs team. To also include the fact that even on district holidays, our contractors in capital programs continue to work and are held accountable for their project schedules. In the summer, we have a summer work plan where we peak all of our resources during that time frame. We also block out periods for employee vacations or employee leaves because we are in an intensive work period. That work period is reconciled with the scheduling for our summer extended summer programming to ensure that our students have access to the facilities that are required to support them through the summer period, and that we get the work done in the facilities that have been prioritized for work during that period.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions, or should we let them continue with their presentation?
Councilman, Chairman, I had a question.
Member Harity.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it won't take long. It's a short
Take
question.
as long as you need.
In this, the $7 billion, that's what we need to complete everything, correct?
According to 2017.
17, right, except for inflation. So you figure maybe 8.5, right? Case of inflation or something like that. Do you have a plan in place if we can get the governor and the Senate and the House to agree and say, hey, we're going to give you this money over the next so many years? Is there a plan in place where we can get started ASAP if they were to do that?
On the next slide, I want to talk about what we will do over the next 30 days so that if legislators in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania give us the money, we can be shovel ready to move in the near term to do just that. So Chair Jones, if with your permission, if I could share the next couple of slides, I think that might speak to Council Member Harity's question.
Please proceed.
All right, if we could pull the slide deck back up, please, and go to slide number, next slide. All right, so we'll talk about next steps. We have begun the process of launching a facilities project team. Why do we want a project team? To get at what Council Member Harity just said, we don't want 5 or 6 or 7 people at 440 to go into a room, close the door, and come out and say, hey, this is it. We know it's really important that we work with our city, our community, our legislators. So we have begun the process of staffing up a facilities project team. And within the next 30 days, the membership of that team will be complete. It will be representative of various stakeholders in the city, and it will have a clear charge. The project team will include internal and external stakeholders, and we will identify the investments needed to significantly improve academic achievement relative to the forthcoming strategic plan, and to really drive hard on 2 of the goals, the guardrails that the Board of Education quite appropriately has already set for us. Guardrail 1, every school will be a safe, welcoming, and healthy place where our students, staff, and community want to be and learn each day. This means that our schools will be environmentally safe and clean, and spaces with inclusive climates that provide students with access to robust social, emotional, and mental health supports. And Guardrail 2, every student will have a well-rounded education with co-curricular opportunities, including arts and athletics, integrated into the school experience. So we intend to staff up this project team over the next 30 days. We will have the membership finalized before April 30th. If we can get it done sooner, we will. And then we'll pull that team together and we will begin to dig deeper into what we just shared with you today. We'll do a deeper dive into the numbers. We'll look at the sub recommendations, including the facility index scores for every school in the district. And we'll have a process working with that team of people, inclusive of city individuals, other people, to include likely our university, some of our university partners, people who have expertise in other areas that are relevant to this work. We want to make sure that we have adequate parent and community representation as a part of this project team. And we want people internal to the district who are working on the academic strategy so that we can improve third grade reading performance, improve math performance, get our kids ready to go into the building trades, get our kids ready to go into 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, into the world of work, the military and the like. We're going to pull all that team together within the next 30 days, and then we're going to move right down the road to the next set of decisions that we'll need to make. But before we get to the what, we need to dig into the more of the details in the report, A. B, we need to price out what the $7.789 billion price tag would be in 2023 dollars. So we know exactly what to advocate for. And then C, we'll have to make decisions about whether we get the Chevy, the Cadillac, the Lincoln, the Chevy. But our aspiration is going to be always to go after the Cadillac. We're going to make the case. Our kids deserve it. And that would be the last slide, Mr. Chairman, and we're happy to take any other questions you may have.
Member Harity, did that answer your question? Member? I would imagine it does do. Are there any other questions from members for this panel? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Hopefully you will stick around as we go through the other panels. We should be able to do that quickly, and there might be some follow-up questions. One last question. On this ambitious amount of work to be done, where is there an opportunity for CTE schools like Randolph to participate in some of the actual assistant to the assistant work that can be done in light of what is that Rule 185, I think it is, where they have to spend some of this time in practicum and mentorships? Would this be an opportunity to set up a program with a carpenter class, with a plumbing class, with a sheetrocking and painting class, to actually be in the work that is being generated by the schools?
I think that makes a lot of sense, Councilmember Jones. We'll write that down as a homework assignment and think about how it could be a learning opportunity for students and adults, quite frankly. We'll take that as a homework assignment and get back to you.
School to paycheck pipeline. Thank you so very much.
Love it. Yes, sir.
I like your analogies, and I always want to have my cards face down, you know, so people can see what I'm using. You think I butchered that, but that's from you. All right, Mr. Cohen, can you?
Quick question, Mr. Chair. Quick question.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, don't be. You're all right.
First of all, I want to say thank you for all the information and for the dialogue today. Is very much appreciated. Clearly, we still have a lot of work to do, so this is a good step in the right direction. Just real quick, and I know that this is something that I spoke to some folks on the district side about, but Mr. Superintendent, just if you can, brief thoughts on the idea of creating a school building authority. We talked briefly about looking at what we do with the Energy Authority and other authorities as it relates to partnering with the city to have a specific focus. I know that you are very much focused on academic achievement. You've talked about that since probably before you even stepped foot in Philadelphia, and you've been consistent on that message. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on creating a school building authority that would work in collaboration with the district and the city and the state with the focus on executing a plan around facilities, which can, I think, put you and your team in a position where you can maybe spend a little more time on academic achievement. Just want to hear your thoughts on that, because that's something that my team and I have been exploring and talking to other council members as well as other stakeholders about.
Thank you, Chair Thomas. Yes, I found it to be very enlightening to learn about conversations that already have been occurring among my bosses on the Board of Education relative to the merits of a school building authority or some kind of entity like that, similar to what we've seen in places like New York City and Washington, D.C. I think this project team provides a great vehicle and an opportunity to put all of those items on the table in terms of how we can do the work quicker and more efficiently and engage the community better. So I think that's a really good point that you brought up, and look forward to having this project team explore that under the leadership of our Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get that information on the record. Thank you, Superintendent.
Yes, sir.
Member Thomas?
I'm good to go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Superintendent. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes,
I said that. I don't know if you can hear me.
No, I'm good now.
Thank you, sir.
With that, are there any other members of the committee that would like to ask questions? Seeing none, can you, Mr. Cohen, let us know who the next panel of witnesses to testify are?
Mr. Chairman, there are no further witnesses, but I did see that President Streeter had his hand up for, I assume, for comment.
President Streeter, you are being recognized. Please state your name for the record.
I'm Reginald Streeter, President of the Board of Education. I just also wanted to piggyback off of what Dr. Watlington said about some type of authority. Yeah, I think there definitely is. I think it definitely has some type of authority would be helpful to help the district focus on educating children and other things. It seems like right now it feels like we're like a city within a city that has to do all the things that a city has to do and educate children as it relates to urban planning and things like that. I think an authority would be most effective at helping us once we figure out what to do with our buildings to actually effectuate it. I know right now we're working with PIDC to help with the building of 3 schools right now so that the district doesn't have to oversee the actual building of a school. An authority I think would be very helpful for that, to scale that up, where if you are trying to rebuild 50, 60, 70, 200 buildings, that there's an authority for that. So I know that Councilmember Thomas is in the early stages, and I'm pretty sure that, a lot of the kinks have to be worked out. But I think some type of help to the district in figuring out how to not only create the plan, but execute the plan in a way that doesn't take Dr. Watlington's, energy energy from educating children would be helpful. So looking forward to where this conversation goes. And I'm looking forward to be helpful any way that I can as board chair.
Thank you so very much for your comments. It's got to be daunting to try to figure out where those watermarks are for when a school should be looked at for major repairs, when it should be considered for replacement. Those are big decisions that have intended and unintended consequences. But I will tell you this. We welcome out in the 4th District the Cassidy School. When one door shuts, another one opens. And when we decided to replace that school, people in the community and all around the city are looking forward with great anticipation to what comes next. Whether we're talking about modernized workspaces, maker spaces, weather stations, things like places where you do coding. It is all designed with not just the current job market in mind, but future job markets. And so we're excited to take old buildings and replace them with new opportunities. So thank you for that. With that, Mr. Cohen, what is so there's no new group. Are we having public comment?
Yes, there are 3 individuals slated to testify in public comment. The first individual is Judith Robinson.
So we will have the witnesses disconnect. We'll take a brief moment to connect the public comment. So thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
So are we connected, Miss Robinson? Judith Robinson, how are you? Are you there?
Good afternoon.
There we go. How are you, Miss Robinson?
I'm doing fine.
Would you state your name for the record and please submit your comment?
Oh, good afternoon. My name is Judith Robinson, and I'm here to testify on several bills, or as it relates to bill or resolution, I should say, 230089. I think the school district should really focus on our children, our graduates. It's so important that we make that the focus. I am on the environmental advisory council, okay, for the school district, and I was quite alarmed to hear, I guess, these very hazardous stories about the school board, and I just want to reiterate what the folks from the school district of Philadelphia have presented to us, that it's a process that's working. And I don't want us to be so far in an emergency mode that we don't look at this as an opportunity. You're talking about billions of dollars, all kinds of contracts. I really appreciate the fact that we can sit down, have a plan, and think of how we can be inclusive of all involved. The children, the students who use these facilities, yes, we must consider them first and foremost, the teachers, the support staff, all of those folks. But these environmental issues, as I know as being an environmental educator, informal one, are going to be forever. We keep coming up hearing about viruses and biological warfare. It appears is going to be the future. So let's not be so alarmed that we don't look at these opportunities and think about how we can include everybody. We're not going to tear down all of our buildings. Historic preservation will prevent that. I think we need to be clear. I'm going to go back to this 2017 report, and I think we all should refresh our minds because as we talk about these dollars and how they're increased in value over a period of time, we also must think about prevention. I know this as a real estate professional. Certain environmental hazards, they tell you not to touch, not to bother them, leave them in their present state. Asbestos over many years was very much a great heat conductor. It was used for good reasons. We know lead is no longer used in paint since 1978. So I just want to caution us about these emergencies. My alma mater is Simon Gratz, and what I saw on the news was the newer part of the building. A lot of our buildings in North Philadelphia are relatively new, but so I just want to caution us as we focus on these environmental issues, slow up the pace a bit. I think it's going to require planning. I feel very good about those meetings that are held with the Environmental Advisory Council. I've been attending them for a couple of years now. I've attended most of them. I thought we were getting cogent clarity on this these environmental issues. I think we need to think about environmental justice as we deal with these issues, because you know what I hear, and I've noticed this since I really took a real dive into what was going on in the school district back in 2013 when they were proposing to shut down all of our schools. And I saw that a lot more attention is paid to the capital projects. We could put $1 million on a roof, which I find to be exorbitant, even till this day, yes. Okay, but we're not so focused on that our third graders can read on grade level. You know, all of these issues are important. But as an African American mother in the heart of North Central, that's what I'm looking at too. And that's what I looked at in 2013 just as an example, I'm just going to tell you how we can get this done, and we all have eyes to look, so we need to have expertise at the table. I've been watching this for years. Pierce School over here, 23rd Street in North Philadelphia, was just, it's being created, done now. It was demolished and refurbished and rebuilt, I should say. But a little bit before that decision was made, over $1 million were spent, and you could check the records because that's what I go by as documents. $1 million was spent putting lentils in that self-same building that was demolished not too long afterwards. Now, if anybody knows about lentils in their architectural part of a building, there's no way that money should have been spent. So we need to know that we have expertise in the room. I have been on several facility manager boards or committees. So you have expertise in the community. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Anybody with expertise like myself in real estate and industrial real estate and commercial real estate have been watching this stuff and can help our school district. I contend we have expertise here. Maybe you all didn't know I'm on this environmental advisory council, that you even know that exists. I did reach out to every council person on this committee to let them know those questions that I would have asked. Thank you all for asking some of them too. There's a lot to deal with the school district. I swore off back in 2013. It was too much for me. I try to stay in my lane. But my lane is always anywhere where it's dealing with the community. So I guess I have to pay more attention to what's going on at the school district. I was there. I saw the guardrails. Dr. Waddington, thank you very much. I will be following up. And I just thank you all for the time. As budget hearings are coming up, we will to be continued. And thank you so much for the time. Have a great day.
Thank you for your testimony. And you're so right that we have to pay attention. If nothing more, COVID taught us about emergency panic spending. When we were trying to solve some of the issues related to ventilation in our classrooms, we hastily ran out and bought like 10,000 window fans. These little fans that you would see that were supposed to suck the exhaust and therefore virus out of the windows, and were found to be relatively useless. And we spend all that money in a knee-jerk fashion, which was a waste. But what we have evolved to is looking at filters and exhaust systems and looking at doubling down on the filter on HVAC to be more effective. So when we take our time, when we study, when we take our knowledge and then apply it through good purchasing of equipment, that benefit goes on way beyond a virus. It creates a better environment for our kids. So your comments are duly noted. Thank you so much for them. Mr. Cohen, who do we have next?
The next individual for public comment is Lizzie Rothwell.
Ms. Rothwell, are you there? Ms. Rothwell.
Hello.
Hey, Ms. Rothwell, how are you this afternoon?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good. Would you state your name for the record and please give your testimony?
Okay, just a moment. Sorry, let me just put you on mute over on, I guess I'm behind on watching you. So yes, my name is Elizabeth Rothwell, and I'm an architect, a parent, and a resident of West Philadelphia. My children attend Henry Lee Elementary, which is our catchment K-8 school, and it's full of wonderful teachers, a supportive staff, and a warm community of fellow students. Our school building, however, like many in the district, is over 100 years old. According to the 2017 Facility Conditions Assessment, it needs over $14 million in repairs. I don't know whether the 2022 Facility Conditions Assessment shows that some of these repairs have been completed or whether new ones are now needed, because the 2022 report for Lee has not been made public. What I can tell you, though, is that when my husband and I were in the building in January for our teachers' conferences, we sat next to a legacy heating unit in the hallway. You could actually see visible waves of heat rising off of this. Needless to say, we kept our distance from the exposed surfaces of that unit. I can also tell you that my son's classroom and the basement cafeterias in the building regularly have carbon dioxide concentrations of over 1,200 parts per million. These are measurements he's taken using a portable CO2 monitor, and which are consistent with the ventilation reports that the district released in fall 2020, which showed 0 cubic feet per minute of airflow in about 2/3 of Lee's classrooms. As was just being spoken about, the issue of inadequate ventilation in our school buildings came to light in the context of the COVID pandemic, but really dates much further back. The pre-pandemic ASHRAE standard for building ventilation, so this is the industry standard, calls for 15 cubic feet per minute of fresh air per person in the room. Again, my son's classroom has 0 cubic feet of fresh air supplied to it. There was a moment in late 2020 when I thought the school district was going to address this problem on a district-wide scale, and they did not. By summer 2021, the district had stopped updating these airflow spreadsheets that they had shared in the fall of 2020. They had been updating them through that spring to reflect the limited repairs they were making. But then instead of providing effective air quality mitigation via filtration in classrooms that lacked a functioning ventilation system, the district spent $4.5 million on ionizing air purifiers, which supply at most 60 cubic feet per minute of air using an unproven technology, ionization, not filtration. In short, 3 years into an airborne pandemic, our children are still sitting in classrooms with an insufficient supply of clean air and no filtration-based air cleaners. But again, none of this information is new. Between 2011 and 2016, a CDC NIOSH team took measurements of temperature, humidity, and carbon dioxide in 50 of our buildings. They collected dust samples, carried out mold and moisture assessments, conducted surveys of the health of the teachers who taught in these buildings, and concluded that their health was being adversely affected by building conditions. Throughout the current school year, I've been working with Philly DSA's Safe Air campaign to provide DIY air cleaners for district classrooms. These air cleaners are known as Corsi Rosenthal boxes, and they use MERV 13 filters and a box fan to clean 600 cubic feet per minute or more of classroom air. That's 10 times the volume of the district's ionizing purifiers. Putting these boxes into every classroom in the district would cost under $1 million per year and would help control viral spread, as well as removing mold spores and asbestos fibers from the air in buildings where that's necessary. Of course, as like many district parents, I live in fear of finding out any day that moving asbestos fibers is necessary in my kids' classrooms. But of course, this is an intermediate step. It's a Band-Aid. What we really need at Lee and many other buildings is a comprehensive overhaul of the building HVAC system. But in a district with over $8 billion in deferred maintenance and no apparent route out of it, it's the best I could do as a parent and a community member. Please, this is not my job. Please, the district needs to tell us how they're going to prioritize the many urgent upgrades that are needed across all of our buildings so that every student can go to school in a safe, modern facility. There are no more lessons that need to be learned here. There's no more alarms that haven't already been rung, and there's really only a small amount of listening that needs to be done to hear us. We need a plan. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon, and good luck.
Thank you. I know it isn't your job, but it's all of our shared responsibility, and we thank you for your testimony. I remember being in Korea close to 20 years ago, and they had those similar boxes. I had never seen them before, but in the environment we were in back then, some of the business people I were meeting with liked to smoke cigarettes indoors, and that was their answer to filtration. They didn't have exhaust systems. They just circled and filtered the air in a way that kept it breathable. And that was
yes. If you can't eliminate the source of the contaminant, that's the next best thing. But yes, thank you. We need something.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Cohen.
Mr. Chairman, there are no other individuals for public comment.
Is there anyone else here to testify on this resolution? Any comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, this committee on public safety and education will stand at recess until the call of the chair. Thank you all for your patience. Thank you for your testimony. And we have a lot of work to do to deal with our environment and our schools, buildings. Thank you. Have a great day.